Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 8.52. Okay, let's continue this. Okay. Pushing into Germany. And other locations as well. Indian Army recruitment advance. That's great. That should give us at least a few more units, maybe cheap ones or not so good ones, but oh well. Now let's see here. We haven't offered them independence yet. Okay, good. And let's go way down to the bottom here. I think that's too far. There is likely. Okay. So that gives us a nice division of colonial recruits. Well. Now let's send them over here. We should probably get... Oh, no. I thought I was clicking on the C. No. Here we are. We should maybe move some more units. Let's see. These African rifles. Now we have to be careful. That last group that I was dealing with transport unit got slaughtered by the Japanese. I don't think the Japanese are getting into this far, so we will risk an unescorted the Polish ships to take them to there and then SR them up. That in just a second. Let's see. Oh, we're winning. That's nice. A lot of little battles. And infantry guns. That's a bullet, but it looks like both of them. What now is so far advanced support weapons or gasoline engines? That's probably it. Yeah. We want to stop that. Well, we're gonna go for this. Just because we're still facing a lot of those defensive battles in Asia. They have a little more. I already shifted some more leadership to officer recruitment. Well, that'll help out some. Go and one here. So we're pushing deeper and deeper and deeper. Gobble it more. More territory. Let's hit this big stack. Hopefully it's a weak stack of units. Counterattack there, that's a good idea. Oh well, yeah, we're losing a little bit there. Yep, well that was a miserable failure. My attempt to hold there. Okay, well. Looking like everybody's retreating. Now the question is will we get replacements there before they occupy the province or not? Because I think it may be hard to dislodge them if do lose it. Now African recruitment. No, I just sent the unit out there with the guess we'll take both of those because we hold 2 places. One in Ethiopia, I do believe, and the other in Kenya. Yeah, so I'm trying to grab Eritreans and African rifles, which maybe we should have waited. I don't know. the leader while they're organizing themselves up. No, for this little unit I'm looking for something that isn't necessarily very good. Just somebody better than nobody. Uh-oh, major defeat. Yes, I could tell that was coming. Now the only question is, can we get there before they occupy the province? Gonna keep advancing. Just occupy as much territory as we can. Denies it to the Germans. Oh, is it taking too long for this attack here now? Okay, almost there. Slow movement, time of weather, crossing a river. They just may not be able to get there in time. Yes, they're putting up a tough fight, but they're a hollow unit, so... push there. Keep pushing everywhere. Yeah, we might just be able to hold that line. Seeing the Polish unit here. These two divisions. Don't know how much, and I presumably have talked about them before. But why not, since I've been sort of quiet about talking about history. Obviously, you all know that Poland was partitioned between the Germans and the Soviets. And they sort of kind of also, not just, to my understanding, not just, shall we say, the Soviet, the Polish army soldiers that the Soviet army sort of collected in its invasion of Poland. It was an invasion of Poland, but my understanding is there was very limited fighting. The Poles that by the time the Soviets were coming in, were no longer in fighting spirit. If Warsaw's lost, where's Warsaw? Molen, sort of hard to see here without boats. No, it's right here. Is already lost and everything else. Why put up a stiff fight here? The war's over. But I understand also that of the general Polish prisoners of war, half were given roughly to the Soviets, and the Germans kept the other half. What the Soviets did is they marched all of the officers off into the Katyn forests, somewhere in occupied Soviet-occupied area, Poland, and shot them all. About, 300 or so. That's just the number that's popping into my head, because the Soviets did not want any of the leadership class, because they were generally conservative. They were the educated leadership element of the soldiers, so they just shot them all. Maybe it was 3,000. God, I don't remember. Sorry. But it's the Katyn Forest. You can look it up. When the Germans were sort of led to it once they, invaded the Soviet Union, they put out all this stuff which everyone dismissed as propaganda. But for once, the Germans were telling the truth. The Germans did not shoot their leadership element of the Poles. Basically, they took all of the Polish prisoners of war, put them in more work camps than prisoner of war camps, and basically slowly worked them to death. That may be slightly overstating it. They weren't quite worked to death. This is my understanding, and God, I'm not an expert on this. They weren't quite worked to death like the Jews were worked to death. They were worked very harshly, fed very little, and were turning into skin and bones, most assuredly, and probably would have ended up that way. So that was sort of their fate. Wasn't good. I'm pretty sure a number of them survived the war. I mean, in the thousands of the Polish prisoners of war. I think, because they got lots of prisoners from the Soviets, and it was a bad thing. And it wasn't, when I say worked to death, it wasn't quite the feeling that the Germans had for the Jews, and that they were going to die anyways, might as well work them to death, instead of just killing them outright, make them useful as they die. Wasn't like that so much as, this is my understanding of it, it was just more that food was short. For the German soldier, food was short for the German civilian, so your subhuman prisoners of war are going to get even less food. So it's cruel, it's not justification, anything like that. It's just simply things were short. They were the least important person on the who gets fed kind of thing. So it was bad. It was bad. The Soviets basically took their non-leadership element. I don't know about NCOs so much, but the mass of their Polish prisoners, and put them into the Gulag system, to the work Gulag prison camp system. That could also be called work to death. There were definitely death camps within the Gulag system that were sort of the worst punishment camps. They saw some visits to some of the stuff way out here that it was designed to work you to death. Other parts of the Gulag work system, they were generally trying to keep you alive, generally trying to use your labor, but more or less the plan was you were never leaving the camp. You know, the Gulag system, that was the plan, and that's basically what happened to a lot of them. That gets dismantled once Stalin dies, but to my understanding it's there until Stalin's death. And they were used for construction projects to build the Soviet Union, especially build eastward. So that's what was happened. So they were kept mostly together, the Polish prisoners of war. They were also being indoctrinated into the Soviet system. Well, once the Soviets or the Soviet Union was invaded by the Germany, these former prisoners of war now become, and these are, I'm thinking again, a number is popping in my head of 30,000, but maybe it's more, maybe it's like 50,000 of these Polish soldiers. Are now a useful thing. But because of their harsh treatment, they basically refused to fight. There were some ideological Poles that were hooray for communism and whatnot. But most of these Polish soldiers, I mean like 95% or more of them, and they also, of course, in their occupation of parts of Poland, there were a lot of Polish ethnic Poles that were pro-communist. There were a bunch of communist type Poles, and those of course gravitated towards the Soviet Union and the Soviet Army. The Workers' Revolution. So these Poles, the Soviets realized that they weren't going to be able to use them as soldiers, and the Polish government exile in London wants them. Polish government exile before the Katyn Forest, I think, was identified as what happened was the Polish government in exile sort of asked, where is so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so that they knew had been captured and knew had been placed into Soviet custody, shall we say. Prominent Soviet or prominent Polish officers of one sort or another, people that they wanted to talk to. Where are they? Can we talk to them? What's going on? And basically the Soviet response was, a mistake was made. That's basically, my understanding is basically how it came back. And that was about it. And so what happened was all of these Polish soldiers basically, I think it was through this path, just literally marched. Again, I think 30,000 plus of them marched down. Maybe it was on this side of the Caspian, but marched down through the Soviet Union, across to Iran, marched across Iraq, and marched to Palestine. Somewhere they might have gotten some train lifts, but a lot of it was just marching, literally, and it was brutal. The Soviets were supplying some minimal sort of uniforms, were supplying some minimal sort of food along the way, but they marched to Palestine at the time, and there they somewhere in this part of in Iran or Palestine, they adopted a bear. I was reading about the other day, a bear cub kind of thing, small bear, but they kept it, and it served with them through the rest of the war. And supposedly during the Battle of Monte Cassino, and the sort of shown the bear symbol for the Polish ordnance unit or whatever, is shown a bear standing on its hind legs holding a shell. I'm guessing it was maybe, I don't know if it was doing that or something, but it was supposedly carrying ammunition for some of the artillery. I would sort of guess that it wasn't quite holding it in its arms. I'm guessing that it was in some sort of backpack rig. But it was fairly tame and fairly identifying with this group of Poles, with this ordnance, engineering ordnance type group. And so it fought through the war with them, to get it out of Palestine, to get it on board a ship, it had to be inducted into the Polish army, and was a private at the time, and had all the papers to prove that it was a private, so the British would take it on its ship. Later got promoted to corporal, and so fought through the war with the Poles, because some of the Polish units, of course, weren't terribly, especially with what was happening towards the end of the war, with the Soviet occupation and the battle for Warsaw the second time, when the Polish uprising happened, and the Soviets stopped right here and waited until the Germans crushed them, and then advanced again, because they didn't want those Polish leadership elements to control Poland. A lot of the Polish units were moved to Britain, at least for a while, and that's where the bear was demobilized and went and spent the rest of its life in the Edinburgh City Zoo. It really liked smoking cigarettes. It also really liked drinking beer, big time beer drinker, and liked smoking cigarettes, but or eating them. Supposedly eating them was fine too, but it did actually smoke them, according to what is written. Once it was in the zoo, it just ate them because people knew to throw a cigarette to them, and there was no one there to light him. He couldn't light his own cigarette. So, no, they weren't allowing visitors to the zoo into the bear cage, smartly, of course, to light the cigarettes. So he would just eat the cigarettes. So it spent the remaining of its life, I don't know if quite last days, but the rest of its life, living in the Edinburgh City Zoo. Just sort of an interesting little tale, I thought. No, I want you up there. So that's sort of the story of the Polish army in exile during World War II. I think a fair number of them did stay in the West, the Polish soldiers. Well, we're going to end the episode there. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.